Hi everyone, welcome to the Your Life Unfiltered podcast with your host, Janish Kothari and Deepam Jain. In this podcast, we dig deep into the life experiences of our guests to connect the dots between their early experiences and what they're doing today. Before I get into it, if you guys are not already connected to Your Life Unfiltered on Instagram and on YouTube, please be sure to give us a follow and subscribe. With that said, today we have a very special guest, Janish Kothari. Janish, you want to quickly introduce yourself?
Hi guys, my name is Janish Kothari. I'm a non-invasive cardiologist and I'm also a men's lifestyle and fashion content creator on Instagram. Pleasure to be here and thank you guys for giving me the opportunity and tell you a little bit about my story.
Absolutely, Janish. Great to have you here. Before we talk about anything else, could you tell us a little bit more about what is non-invasive cardiology? Like, what does it stand for?
So cardiology is obviously an umbrella kind of term, and within that umbrella, there's different subspecialties. You have electrophysiology. These are the guys that put in pacemakers and devices, and they deal with arrhythmias. And then you have heart failure specialists that deal with very severe levels of heart disease. And then you have you can be a specialist in imaging and cardiology, so you deal with cardiac MRIs and echoes and all that kind of stuff. But a non-invasive cardiologist kind of has knowledge about a lot of these things, but they're not a specialist in any one of them. So we don't actually do any procedures. Like I'm not going into the cath lab and doing those procedures, or I'm not going into the EP lab and putting in pacemakers and things like that. Although I could do those things. I have the training to do those things. So a lot of my stuff is managing patients in the hospital and the ICU, the critical care units for cardiology, seeing patients in the outpatient. I also perform procedures like stress testing, transesophageal echocardiograms, transthoracic echocardiograms, dealing with all these different cardiac medications. And so I kind of touch upon a lot of these other things, but just not specifically a specialist.
Got it. Thanks so much for giving us that context. So with that, let us go back a few years. Talk to us a little bit more about early childhood, early upbringing, any inspirations, motivations that you had that stuck with you early on, and maybe try to connect with them with what you're doing today, both in fashion and medicine.
So, yeah, I mean, where to begin? I guess the beginning would be the best place. I was born in India, but me and my family came here when I was like 9 months. So, I'm 33 now, so I'm pretty much have been, in America my whole life. Growing up, I grew up in Jersey City, and maybe Ketul knows, Jersey City was not exactly the ideal environment. An Indian kid growing up there, looking the way I look. It was a very diverse kind of population. My friends growing up were Hispanic, Black, Puerto Rican, Chinese, Filipino, Vietnamese, Italian, and this is my group of friends, from high school. So when I grew up, I didn't really ever see like color. I didn't see, different ethnicities. To me, this is just like normal, and I look at my current situation now in Pennsylvania. I'm like, I'm the only guy that looks like me more often than not. But yeah, growing up, it was a kind of a tough neighborhood. My parents were 9-to-5 workers trying to do whatever they could, to put food on the table, the typical American dream that our immigrant families are chasing. So they didn't really have a lot of time to like invest in, what we were doing. So I was always kind of like getting myself into trouble and spending a lot of time in the principal's office and just finding ways to create mischief, being mischievous. So I just found myself having to like grow on my own and adapt to like the environments that I was being put myself in, growing up, I learned very quickly to have thick skin and kind of stand up for myself. I was bullied quite a bit. I was like 4'10" in my high school. I was the shortest kid. I'm not that tall now. I'm like 5'8", So I always had to kind of be a little bit bigger than I physically was. So throughout all that bullying and stuff, I got a lot of thick skin, and a lot of the mentalities and stuff that I have today I'm kind of thankful for, every time somebody threw me in a garbage can, or, I remember certain birthdays when I was, they announce your birthdays when you're in high school, you would get those birthday punches, and they weren't like playful. They were like, it was that kind of environment. My high school was in the middle of 4 different projects, and not really like the best neighborhoods. You couldn't go outside for lunch. There were times that we had like, plays or, performances at the high school, and, leaving after certain hours, we would be walking home to the bus stop, and me and my friends would get jumped or something like that. So I guess I developed spidey senses very early on, and I was always on my toes. Anytime I'm walking, even till this day, like I'm always kind of looking over my shoulder, and I don't know if it's just more reflex now, but I bring that up because that environment kind of made me the person that I am today. I'm very quick on my toes, and I can adapt to a lot of situations. And that tough exterior allows me to kind of navigate a lot of the things that I face in my life day to day. It's very hard for people to break my mentality and kind of get me to, give in. And I think a lot of that motivation is something that I continue to carry, and hopefully things that I'm going to share with my kids in the future. In terms of inspirations and stuff, you live in your house with your parents and seeing the sacrifices and stuff that they made for you.
Mhm.
I really reflect on those things. My dad is he's like your hero. Like all of our dads are our heroes. You see the things that they did. I remember those mornings. He'd wake up at 4 o'clock, go to Dunkin' Donuts, and he'd be working there, come home to sleep for like an hour, and then go to like the supermarket that he was being a grocer at and things like that. And he was sleeping like 2-3 hours a day, and just he did that for a couple of years because that was the easiest way that he could put money, because all the education stuff that he had from back home, it just didn't work here. Family was actually pretty well off in India. They had their farms, and they were businessmen and all that kind of stuff. So, but when we came here, the typical immigrant story: $70 in your pocket. What do I do? And then my parents obviously were able to cultivate these dreams that they had for themselves and for us, and put us in positions to succeed, me and my sister included. She's also a physician, a gastroenterologist. So I looked at my dad and all the hard work and stuff that he did, and maybe you guys can relate too. You always just kind of have to do a little bit better than your parents, because if you don't, it seems like you've kind of failed for a lot of their sacrifices that they made for you. You know what I mean? So overall, my parents were very
Mhm.
supportive of, I I wouldn't say I always wanted to be a physician. There were certain other areas of my life that I found passion in.
Mhm.
And a lot of it was like artistic expression. I remember in high school I was in the AV club, and I put together our video for our graduation. And in college I ran the fashion show for our AIR, Association of Indians at Rutgers. We used to have the annual fashion show. I put that whole thing together, and that was like a way for me to kind of get that creativity out. But in our culture, you tell your parents, "Hey, I want to go to film school. I want to go to FIT for fashion design and things like that." It doesn't necessarily always work out. But my parents were like, "Hey, we'll do it. We'll support you. We'll pay for you to go to school and stuff. But think about what you want to do after and the kind of life that you want to live." And they were right.
Mhm.
I mean, it's not easy to go down those routes and then be the next Ralph Lauren or the next Tom Ford and all that kind of stuff, or the next Spielberg or the Christopher Nolans, in the film industry. So I,
Mhm.
I kept that in mind. Like I said, I know the sacrifices that my parents made, and I wanted to live a certain lifestyle. And science was something that I always excelled at. It came relatively easy to me, and even though I'm Indian, math and business and stuff, it didn't really like stick with me. It didn't really like hit. So science came relatively easy to me, and I found myself being much more fascinated by the human body and how things work. I remember, when Home Alone was a thing, you had the talk boy. I remember one time my talk boy got burned because I overcharged it or something, and I smelled that smoke coming from it. I took it apart and tried to figure out where the problem was, and I ultimately ended up fixing it because one of the capacitors had like just got messed up or something. I just had to change it and fix it. And just taking things apart and putting them back together was like fascinating to me. And then when you look at the human body, it's kind of like that. It's just a lot of these pieces that once you understand the intricacies of how the physiology and stuff works, it just makes sense. And that's kind of how I fell into the whole aspect of cardiology. It just kind of makes sense. If you tighten up the pipes, pressure goes up. You loosen up the pipes, pressure goes down. The heart inherently is a pump, right? So if the pump is not working, things get backed up. And I feel like as human beings, we have an inherent understanding of fluid dynamics and things like that. I can explain this to any patient and they can understand that. So that's kind of how the cardiology thing made sense.
Mhm.
And then the fashion aspect, that also comes from my dad. Growing up, he was a big fashion guy. Like I said, we had a pretty luxury life back in India, and my dad, all of his clothes were completely tailored. He'd go to the Destiny's India, right? Surat, and Destiny's the designer. So he would go there, get all his suits and everything, designed custom. But when he came here, he didn't have enough money to do any of that. So when he started doing that, I remember just growing up, and we'd go to the mall every few days a week, and we just shop and shop and shop, and like as if it was mother and daughter, but it was father and son, and we both kind of got that. And he taught me a lot of like these lessons about when you're going to leave the house, make sure your pants are pressed, your shirt is ironed, your breath is clean, and your hair is done, because you never know who you're going to meet. And I don't know why he was telling me this, but that's what he does. Till this day, he's always done this. And that's kind of something that I've adopted. And then I learned that fashion was a means of expression for me. It's language, And he
Mhm.
said, people are going to talk about you, give them something to talk about. So for me, being this small kid, putting on clothes was like putting on a cape or a costume or something. And I recall like a quote that Cary Grant said, I was pretending to be someone until I became him or he became me. Eventually, we kind of just found each other. And I felt like growing up, I was trying to find that identity in myself, and fashion allowed
Mhm.
me to explore that. And a lot of the things that I am today is just through a lot of these experiences. So here I am.
Wow. Yeah, so it sounds like your early childhood experience did definitely influence what you're doing today, especially on the fashion angle. And then for the science angle, that it seems like you kind of fell into it because you excelled in sciences. That's pretty interesting. Now, here's the $1,000,000 question. Which do you enjoy more, fashion or medicine?
See, that's a good question. I've thought about this, and I don't know if there's like a delineation between both of these. They are me. I'm not pretending to be anybody that I'm not. All the stuff that I post on like social media, I'm not getting dressed for a photo. Like this is what I'm wearing when I'm going out with my friends or whatever event that I'm going to. I'm not, and the effort that I put into, coming up with outfits and stuff for like my trips and things like that, it's just my way of expressing myself. So I wouldn't say I like one more than the other, because these are just my life. And work is, I've put in over a decade of training and education. And I'm sure you guys know, like the journey of medicine, it's time and finances and all these commitment and sacrifices that you make. I don't think you can go through all that and just say, the hell with it. You know what I mean? So I feel like both of them are just me. And the way the social media thing even started was I always wanted to showcase that doctors can be intelligent and they can have the book smarts and the bedside manner and all that kind of stuff, but they can also have a certain aesthetic. I don't know about your experience as physicians, but growing up, I would go to my pediatrician and his pants were never ironed, his shirt was never tucked in, his hair was all over the place, the little that he had at that time. And like, he would get close to you, checking your ear or whatever, and his breath would always smell. And I was kind of like, he was a great doctor, but I feel like that aesthetic would turn a lot of people off. So I wanted to show people that you can care for your appearance and still care for patients and all that kind of stuff. And as I was going through my training, I had a lot of patients just kind of come up to me like, hey, doc, I've never seen a doctor that kind of carries the way you do. I know every time you walk into the office and I see you walk into the room, that you woke up that morning, you put effort into yourself. I know you're going to put effort into the way you care for me. And that was like one of the most like impactful statements any of my patients have ever said to me. And I'll never forget. It was my last day of my residency, and this is the guy that I've been seeing for the past 3 years. And he never mentioned that to me, but my last day with him, I told him, hey, it's my last time I'm seeing him. I'm going on to like the next journey. And that's what he told me. And I guess I was having that impact without pretending at that point. I was just being me. And that was kind of being exuded, that aura was being exuded. And it was impactful for me. So there's no difference. And what you see is like, that's just who I am.
Got it. Got it. So it's like different aspects. One is like I guess the monetary route with being a doctor, and the other one is like the creative expression, like you were alluding to.
Mm-hmm.
Got it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Interesting. And so I know you started doing the menswear blogging, I think it was 2018 or something? Can you tell us like
2017.
Okay.
Yeah. So, like I said, I always wanted to do that, right? I wanted to showcase my life as a physician and my life as a fashion enthusiast. But by the time I had that idea, I wasn't a doctor. I was still in school. And at that time, when I had the idea, the platform didn't even really exist. Facebook really wasn't that. Facebook was like, people weren't putting together curated photos like dedicated to have a certain aesthetic. It was just you go out with your friends, you have your flip phone, and you take a photo and you post it at that time, right? I go back to my Facebook photos from like 2003. I'm just like, what was I thinking? You know what I mean? So that platform didn't really exist. But then like the biggest medical kind of fashion kind of guy that came about was Dr. Mike, and everybody kind of knows him in the fashion medical kind of community. So he took this idea that I had in my head, but he's older than me, so he already had that platform, and Instagram was just kind of coming out, and he did it. And I was like, damn, this is my idea. I just wasn't there. I wasn't ready to do it because I hadn't finished school or anything, and I didn't want to be one of those pre-med students and changed my name, Dr. J, and then I'm still a pre-med kid. And then everybody's like, but you're not even a doctor. Like, how could you do this? So I didn't want to be a fraud. I didn't want to try to portray something that I wasn't at that time. So I think like July 3rd or July 4th was my first post in 2017. And that's when I just started my residency. So I was able to do all that. So all the ideas and stuff were there. I just needed the time to be correct.
Got it. Wow, very interesting. So, Janish, one thing that I'm really, and I guess all of our listeners are really trying to understand is, how do you manage time? Being a doctor is a full-time job. Obviously, it's a demanding job on one hand, and then doing fashion blogging and being doing creating content for men's enthusiasm, and I think all those things. That's also takes a lot of time. So, how do you basically manage your time between the two aspects?
People ask me that all the time. And I think the first thing that comes to mind is, if you love what you do, you never work a day in your life. I've had a job since I was 16 years old. At every point, I worked at Hollister, I worked at Abercrombie, I did electronics in Target, I was a pharmacy technician, I worked in a research lab. Throughout all those things, I never worked. It never felt like work. And I always thought to myself, somebody's paying me money to go to work and hang out with my friends and like do whatever I'm supposed to do. So it never felt like work. And I've always been a very high energy kind of guy. And at some points, my parents thought I had like ADHD or whatever. And maybe I still do. I don't know, but I just always had a lot of this energy and I just wanted to get it out. But then when you start doing things that you really enjoy, like there are days I'm in residency and like I had photo shoots or something to go to that I had scheduled.
Mm-hmm.
And here I am there, like a 6 o'clock long day, crazy stuff that I was dealing with. And then I go to this shoot. I'm just super excited to do that. So it never really felt like work because I was enjoying what I'm doing,
I see.
And when people ask me like where the motivation comes from, like if you find what you love doing and you're not going to want to stop doing that, anything that you guys enjoy right now too, I'm sure like you wake up, you're like, oh shit, I want to go do this. You know what I mean? So I've always just kind of been like that, and maybe to a fault, and that way of thinking doesn't work for everybody. But for me, it's kind of the way I've achieved success in my life is just with that mentality, is just find things that you love doing and keep going at it.
Got it.
That's really well said, because if I think about it, I think Deepam, you'll agree with this as well. We can create parallels with the podcast as well, right? Because for a lot of people, the concept of podcast is a lot of work, right? You got to get the guests, you got to record with them, you got to do the video editing, the audio editing, and then post in like a bunch of different platforms. So it definitely is a lot of work, but for us, it doesn't really feel like work because we do enjoy it, right? We enjoy hearing other people's perspectives. We enjoy the challenge of like getting interesting guests on. And then, yeah, there's a little bit of work involved with the marketing, the social media presence, the audio and video uploading, but the you kind of get energy from the interaction of speaking with different types of people. So I think it kind of balances out in that way.
100% agree with that, Ketul. So Janish, talk to us a little bit more about your fashion blogging experience. So what kind of stuff do you specialize into? Is there any specific type of category? I mean, I'm just kind of throwing it out there, but I'm just keeping it open-ended. I'll leave it to you to really frame the answer to that.
So it's funny, growing up where I grew up, hip hop was a big influence in me, Nas, Eminem, Jay-Z, like all these types of old school hip hop, boom bap kind of vibes is what I grew up with. So, I grew up wearing Air Forces and oversized jeans and 3X t-shirts and things like that. I think a lot of that was just because it was my environment. I obviously enjoyed the music till this day. Like that's my genre. That's what I love listening to. But then I recall my barbershop that I used to go to used to be called Mass Appeal, which is an album by Gangstar, right? So I was sitting in the booth, and you would think there's like this hip hop kind of barbershop, but on the walls they had black and white photos of Cary Grant, Frank Sinatra, Sam Cooke, and Dean Martin, and Sean Connery, and and then they were dressed in this like very sartorial style suits, and just very polished men. You think of Frank Sinatra, the ultimate bad boy, and like ladies' man, and all that kind of stuff. And he was always dapper, always put together, and the people that I was growing up around, they didn't have that. So it's kind of unique that this barbershop had that. So I started like learning more about it, and I started doing research about, Frank Sinatra and like his history. He actually grew up in Hoboken, which is like that's where I worked, my pharmacy that I was working at. And, that's where Frank Sinatra grew up, So I started learning more about sartorial men's fashion. And I started kind of shifting my attire. At that point, this was maybe 2003, 2004. And when I was in high school, I was the only kid dressing in preppy, the diesel shoes and the fitted, jeans. And at that time, we were all doing the double polos that we flip the collar up and two colors are showing. My God, it was terrible. And then, yeah, and I was a kid walking into class with like the sweaters on my shoulder, like the Carlton look and all that kind of stuff. And like I told you, I just described to you earlier what kind of environment my high school was in. I was the guy that's sticking out like a sore thumb everywhere I went. But that's just started evolving, And then once I felt like my fashion got a little bit more polished, I started learning more, and I started buying better things, and the suiting and all that stuff kind of came into play, because you can't be a high school kid or a college kid going to work in suits and pants, shirt, tie kind of thing. So as I started doing more professional things, the medicine and all that kind of route, the attire started becoming a bit more polished. And then the men's fashion kind of blog, I started doing that. And it was just a way for me to show how I was going to work. I was going to work, which what you're seeing in those earlier images, that's how I went to work, and put my white coat on and do my thing at work. So I think that the evolution of my fashion was a evolution of myself, and that's how as I've grown up, and all the phases that I've been through. So now I'm kind of at that point where I still have certain looks where I'm in like more of a street fashion look, leather jackets and boots and like Chelsea boots and all that kind of stuff. But a lot more of my stuff is, the more the sartorial, bespoke, custom tailored, that kind of look. So I feel like I didn't want people to think when they see me, oh, this guy's just always in suits. But no, he has some, there's levels to it. I can kind of put on all these different costumes, and I just feel like when I put one of those looks on, I feel different. I'm stepping into some other personality, and alludes back to when I was younger. Fashion was a means of expression. You can be anybody you want. There's something quite remarkable about putting on a tux and a bow tie when you're at a wedding. You feel something different, right? Like, I don't know. Did you guys ever feel that? I feel that. 100%. And anytime I put on a blazer, like I feel something different. So the blog is really just an evolution of all my styles over the years, and how I'm trying to blend them too, and still kind of pay homage to some older looks, and what the future is ahead. I mean, I haven't really adopted the men's rompers and all that kind of stuff yet, but
Right.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. It's like I feel like as people get older and they develop, well, everyone has a personality, but you deepen personality in like certain different areas. It's like your style evolves with it, and not even just your style. Like so many aspects of your interests evolve with you. So that makes sense. Well, sticking to that theme of evolution, I mean, you've been putting content out there for a number of years now, right? Since 2017 to now. What's been your experience in terms of the evolution of Instagram? Because that's your focus, the platform of focus, right?
Yeah, it initially just started out as being fun, just like I said, a means of expressing yourself creatively. And then like I started noticing kind of a rise in like the following and the engagement and all that kind of stuff. And then I guess there was like some shift. I don't know when that shift happened, but it became like you couldn't get that exposure if you didn't have a certain look. You weren't paying for your advertising, or you weren't one of the original people that started Instagram that just had that, meteoric kind of climb. And then it's so hard to grow now, and there's a lot of niches. So if you're not somebody that's putting out content like 3 times a day, 5 times a day, whatever your scheduling is, it's just hard to kind of grow. So now I feel like it's always a love-hate relationship with social media. But that changed for me because now I don't do it I don't care if I get to 100,000 followers. It doesn't matter, because it's just fun now. And I got back to what started this journey, enjoying the process, the creative freedom. When that creative freedom was briefly robbed from me because I just wasn't growing and all that kind of stuff, it just wasn't fun, So now my wife helps me shoot some of the content. I don't have any special equipment. A lot of the stuff is just, iPhones and little lights and things like that, but nothing. I haven't really, indulged in buying gear and stuff to do this, because it's not my job. It's fun. It's a hobby for me that just happened to turn into something, and happens to be the reason why I'm sitting here for this interview today. You know what I mean? So
Mhm.
I'm forever grateful for those opportunities, but that's because that relationship has changed. And I'm sure a lot of content creators feel that way, that they're being shadowed and that they're being hidden because they don't fit some rules that Instagram has in play, or the algorithm, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, that's
Right.
a good point. I think it has evolved quite a bit, right? Because in the past, photos were king. If you look back, like I'd say 2016 to like probably 2019 or so, like photos were king, and then now it's way more focused on video. It's actually interesting because a lot of the content creators that we got onto the podcast, they became big in the last couple of years, basically during the pandemic, like basically 2019 onwards, but on the back of video. Everything was about video. It'd be like comedy skits, or it'd be other types of reels. It'd be, basically all centered on video. There'd be some photos here and there, but the bulk of everything came from video. And
Yeah.
interestingly enough, like some of the guests we had on, the reason they actually got even bigger is because they also ended up getting media coverage because of popular reels. So, I mean, the one example that comes to mind is like Vic Krishna. He's one of the people that we had on a couple of episodes ago that we released. He basically got his name known and started to get a lot of media coverage for an educational reel that he created that kind of was like a parody that kind of explained how COVID-19 vaccines work, like why you need a booster shot, et cetera. And that's what really put him on the map. So I definitely hear you about the evolution there. Which, speaking of which, maybe that's something you can think about. Create content related to medicine like that, right? Just like
No, I have. During the pandemic, March 2020, I did something with, was it CBS or NBC? They were asking me to film what a day in my life was at the hospital, and how I had to get in and out of Tyvek suits and all that kind of stuff. So I was sending them videos all the time. They actually made a documentary on that.
oh,
I've done a couple of news correspondence for ITV Gold, which is an Indian kind of news network, and talking about COVID. I've made a couple of appearances on that. And then some other medical magazines like Paceline Fit. I've done some things for them as well. So yeah, I've done a lot of those things. It's just not things that are going to allow me to blow up on social media. People don't care about that aspect of it because I'm not making jokes and
Right.
things like that. That's okay. I feel like if that's going to happen, the time it'll come. I've always been somebody that I try to control things that are within my control, and things that are outside of my control, can't change them. So,
Yeah,
I'm happy with
absolutely.
the way things are for me right now.
okay. Yeah,
Yeah, that makes
fantastic.
sense. So just going back to one of the things that you said before about fashion and fashion trends, I'm just curious to hear your perspective on the latest fashion trends that keeps on coming in. Like, how do you view those things, right? Do you try to kind of cover those things, or like you update your wardrobe? Not, I mean, not for everything, but let's say for one or two things. That, for example, there's double denim, it's in trend these days, or like no shirts and those type of the look that are like in trend right now. Or do you like to keep your own style for the most part, and maybe
Um,
kind of a bit of both?
I never like I've never like subscribed to rules of fashion. Like I said,
Right.
fashion is language and it's a means of expression. So there's these like silly rules. Don't wear white after Labor Day, or there's certain things. I've just never like subscribed to that. The only
Yeah.
thing that I do subscribe is to, if you're wearing a belt, make sure the belt and the shoes match. Like I can't stand it when somebody wears a brown belt and black shoes, or vice versa. That just drives me insane. The only things that I really focus on is tailoring. Fashion does not have to be expensive, and people always message me, oh my god, like you must be so rich because like your clothes are whatever. And I'm like, quite literally not. Like, if you have something that's well tailored and it looks like it fits you, you can make a $100 suit look like it's $5,000 suit. But if you get a $5,000 Canali suit, it's completely not your size. It's going to look cheap. You know what I mean? Like, it's just perspective. And that's what shows me that people don't have the right perspective when it comes to fashion, because they think that it has to be expensive for you to look good. And I
Right.
think that's kind of, that idea is the genesis of fast fashion. The Zaras, the H&Ms, and, Forever 21s, and all these different, fast fashion companies. You walk into it today, you walk in next week, the entire lineup of clothes is different, right? You've
Yeah.
seen that, right? Why is that? Because people are so fixated on what's the next thing, what's the next thing. And as human beings in the modern day where, you're scrolling on social media, you're just waiting for that next hit of dopamine as you're scrolling. What's going to catch my attention? What's going to catch my attention? And fashion has evolved into that now. But that's never like really clicked for me. I've always been the kind of person, I think, invest in long-term stuff. If you wear a suit and it's a quality suit, you can wear that suit for the next 10, 15 years as long as you take care of it. You know what I mean? So I feel like I've always invested in staple pieces that I enjoy, and they're not overtly expensive. I don't have a lot of huge name brand things. Like, I think the most kind of crazy thing that I have is like a Burberry coat that I didn't even buy myself. My sister got it for me for my birthday, kind of thing. I just never been somebody that subscribes to that way of thinking. But if there's things that you enjoy that you feel like you're going to wear for a long period of time, invest in those things. I don't really have a take on the trends. I think it's just like, it's here to stay for now, and then tomorrow it's going to be something different, and it's hard for you to keep up with that, and finance wise and things like that. It's just it seems like a never ending battle, and you're going to lose that.
Yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense. It seems like you're a big advocate for timeless fashion then, which I 100% agree with, right? Because the way that I see it is a lot of the fashion trends that are always changing is basically designed to make those fashion brands money. That's the whole reason that the trends
it is,
right?
That's all it is.
They'll give free stuff to celebrities to start wearing something just to change a fashion trend or to make something in again so that people go out and spend money to try to be cool, right? But if you have that inner compass, that inner confidence, then to be honest, following the latest fashion trends shouldn't matter. It all comes down to look decent. That's the way I view it.
That being said, Janish, if you have to give one piece of advice, or maybe two, to somebody who's trying to step up their fashion game, what advice would that be?
Find a tailor. That's it. That's literally all it is. Find a tailor. I say I did this interview for a magazine that's in Pennsylvania, LV Style Mag, and he asked me that same question. I thought about it for a little bit, and I was like, there's a couple people that everybody needs in life: a doctor, a best friend, and a tailor. And if you're sick, you can go to somebody. If you got something on your mind, you can go to somebody. If your clothes don't fit, who do you go to if you don't got a tailor? You know what I mean? Because like I said, there are times where I buy something and it's completely not my size, but the price point is so good. Like the other day, I just bought these purple corduroy pants from J. Crew. They're normally like $100-something, but they're on sale for like $20. And the size is like a 33, 36, completely not my size. But for $20, I can go to my tailor, pay him $30, and he'll tailor that thing to complete my size. And now I have a pair of $50 pants that were normally $100, completely my size. You know what I mean? So I think that's the best thing you can do. And, thrift store shopping. You can go to a thrift store, a Salvation Army, that kind of thing. If you don't have the means to, buy big, you can get a full outfit for $40, and go to the tailor and make it look like it's $1 million. And if that's where you want to start doing it, and then once you start feeling comfortable and you find your look, your own aesthetic, you're going to realize that it's actually pretty fun. It's the creative expression and freedom that you're getting from it is actually something that you'll enjoy.
Absolutely. Totally get it. Totally agree with that. Okay. That's very, very interesting. All right. So I guess moving on, the next, the question that I have is, what is one thing that you think is common between fashion and medicine, and what is the one thing that is not common between the two disciplines?
Well, it depends kind of how you look at it. I think when it comes to from an effort standpoint, things have to seem seamless. If you look like you're trying too hard, it's probably because you are, and you're trying to like make a certain look fit you. When you walk into a patient's room or whatever, and you're stumbling over your words, you don't really know what's in their chart, maybe mixed up a name, you called them by something differently, that's going to be very obvious, and you're going to lose that patient's trust and their confidence. The same way, So like I was mentioning, that patient that made those comments to me, I think it's because he saw that I was the same guy. Every time he came into my office, every couple of months, the same guy. It wasn't that one day he saw me disheveled and all the other days he saw me put together. He knew that the person that was walking the door was the same guy. So I think that maintain that consistency is important, and you have to feel confident in what you're doing. And the only way to gain that confidence is to be comfortable by doing it over and over again. So the amount of effort you're putting into medicine by just sitting there studying for all these hours, that confidence is inherently going to come. Eventually in fashion, when you find that look, if you're chasing that fast fashion, you're never going to find stability because it's constantly
Right.
evolving, and you're going to be wearing last year's clothing, and everybody's going to tell you that. But if you tell yourself that I'm not wearing last year's clothing, I'm wearing the clothing that I enjoyed, that I just happened to buy last year,
Yeah.
you're going to find that confidence in yourself. So
Wow.
I think just finding that stability and just being comfortable with whatever you're doing, the confidence is going to exude.
Okay, well
Wow,
said.
100%.
Okay, Deepa, if no other questions, you want to move forward to the rapid fire round?
Yeah, let's do that. So, Janish, as the name suggests, rapid fire. So, first thing that comes to mind. Okay, I'll start with an easy one. Tea or coffee?
Coffee.
All right. Mountains or beaches?
Beaches.
Okay. Morning person or night owl?
It's hard to pick because I really don't have a problem waking up early in the morning. But a lot of my best work is done in the late hours of the night.
Okay.
So I'll probably go with late hours.
Okay. What's your favorite comfort food?
Tacos.
Nice.
All right. What's your favorite virtue in others?
I think loyalty is an important thing. You know, it's being able to be vulnerable around people that you find comfort in, and knowing that they're going to take what you say to them and hold it closely to them, you know, and not use that as ammo against you. I think that loyalty aspect is very important.
That makes sense. What's your biggest pet peeve?
I don't like when people are late, and my wife is late all the time.
Maybe send this to her.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. What's your secret superpower?
I have an impenetrable mind. People can't make me feel anything that I don't want to feel. And I always say, you can't make me feel inferior without my consent. So if you upset me, it's because I allowed you to do that. So I don't have levels to my emotions. It's here. And if I choose to do something, it's because it's based on my own volition. And like a lot of that stems from the upbringing. And if I didn't have thick skin, I wouldn't have been able to make it out and fight for yourself and things. So I think it's not easy for everybody, but if you can control how you respond to certain things and your outburst, I think that power is something that's within your control. You know?
Yeah, that's very inspirational.
Very interesting thought, because it reminds me of a quote, right? And that quote is basically, if you can basically evoke emotion in someone else, that means you're controlling them, right? So it's basically very similar thought to what you're saying, where if you don't react to what other people are saying, that means you are in control.
Yeah, and when you kind of understand that, you know, there's that book by Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People. It's obviously a business strategy book, but the whole concept of it, all those rules and commandments, I guess, is how to enter certain situations and being able to get what you want out of those things. But if you're somebody that has this strong mentality, you're not going to leave a room without what you want, you know, or giving away certain things that you didn't want to give away. But from an emotional standpoint, I think it's just, I'm not going to make you allow me to feel something that I didn't want you to allow me to feel, or that I didn't want to feel myself. But that mentality has served me pretty well, and maybe sometimes it could be to a fault. I'm sure it has. I'm not the most emotionally expressive person.
Absolutely. What's a superpower you wish you had?
It could be unrealistic.
It could be unrealistic.
Superpower that I wish I had. Don't all of us want to fly? It would be pretty cool, right?
Yeah.
To fly?
Yeah.
I think so. Just seeing everything from 35,000 foot view.
100%. All right. If you were not a doctor or a fashion blogger, what would you be instead?
I really think I would love to be in movies and things like that, and just be like a superstar. I don't have the skills or talent for any of that, but it would be cool. Like you see all people that you look out to, the Henry Cavills, the Brad Pitts, or even Bollywood, the Shah Rukh Khans, and all these big guys, and it's like they're larger than life. Their whole life is kind of around giving people feelings. And that in itself is sort of a superpower, right? Like you can assume a role of the character that you're playing, and the goal is to evoke emotion in a viewer. And it's more so that I want than just the fame and the stardom. I don't care about that. It's just having the ability to evoke emotion in people. And I think that comes from that celebrity status. You know, people might not like Drake, but it makes people feel something, good or bad, but he makes people feel something. And that level of stardom, you know, it would be nice to kind of maybe have that impact.
Okay, that's cool.
All right. Okay. So I guess this is not rapid fire, but what's next for you?
So I'm at the 5 months left of my training, and then I'm currently, you know, interviewing for jobs. Well, I just finished. I'm waiting to sign some contracts, and the goal is to go back to practice medicine in Jersey, and
Okay.
that's kind of where I'll be. And hopefully, starting in July, and start my career and start living life and not being somebody in training anymore.
That makes sense. That makes
cool.
sense. All right. Yeah, I guess that's it. I guess before we wrap up, do you have any recommendations for our listeners? And a recommendation could be a piece of media, like a book or a movie or podcast, or it could be a general advice.
I think over my life, you know, my 33 years of living, I've learned a couple of things. And the one big thing that like I said, that's allowed me to have success is I've always just been able to take out the noise. And people are going to steer you one way or the other, and it's because they think that's what's going to be best for you. But you kind of have to have a vision for yourself, you know, and you have to put yourself in very vulnerable situations and be uncomfortable with what you're trying to do. Like just this whole social media thing. When I first started doing it, I started posting photos and stuff. And you get these comments from your friends like, "Oh, who are you trying to be?" Or, you know, like just I know they were making jokes and stuff, but in the beginning it hurts, you know, because they don't share that vision with you, and it could be discouraging. And, you know, somebody's like, "Don't do it this way, do it that way," you know, but they don't see that vision, you know, and you just give up on a dream or some aspiration that you have because you allowed somebody else to influence you. I think you should completely be able to explore your ideas the way you want them to. Sure, take, you know, counsel from people that are important to you, but if you let them dictate how things are supposed to turn out, you're never going to feel like you're in the driver's seat, and it's your life. You should be in the driver's seat. So put yourself in vulnerable positions and take chances, because worst case you fail, okay, then you did something and you learned in the process, and now you know how to adapt. And people always ask, you know, have you ever failed? And I'm like, yeah, I fail all the time, literally every day. I'm doing something wrong, but tomorrow I'm learning from it, you know? So put yourself in these vulnerable positions, and you'll be surprised the kind of magic you can create when you kind of just believe in yourself and the work ethic that you're going to put into whatever task is ahead of you.
Very well said.
Yeah, great advice. With that said, that does conclude our discussion here. Did you have any questions for us before we wrap up here?
Yeah. What are your guys' next goals? Like, what's like the next 5-10 year plan for you guys?
Yeah, sure. Deepam, I'll let you go first.
In terms of the podcast, I think it's a couple of things. So number one, we really want to explore this year. So that means that we really want to have a certain number of subscribers on YouTube, because we are really focusing on YouTube this year, with the full length discussions that, you know, we just had today, but also with YouTube Shorts. So that's really number one. Number two is and it's kind of closely related to it as well, is just really get high caliber guests, right? So have quality discussions, just really elevate the overall experience and discussions that we've been having to next level. Today was obviously one part of that. So just really kind of taking it to the next level. And third, just keep meeting interesting and inspiring people like yourselves, and and just keep at it. I think that's probably what I will say for this year. I think in the next 5 years, I don't have a vision for 5 years yet, but I'll get back to you on that once I'm ready.
All right, well said, Deepam. So from a podcast perspective, very similar to what Deepam's saying, I think the first thing is our first immediate goal is hit 1,000 subscribers so we can monetize that channel. Once we're able to monetize, then we really want to start getting views our way. So we were thinking about doing some interesting challenges that we've seen other major YouTubers do that really put them into increased velocity. So one example could be something like saying your life, like having a video where we're just sitting saying your life unfiltered like 10,000 times, something like that. Because the example that comes to mind actually is Mr. Beast. So when Mr. Beast about 5 years ago really took off, he's like one of the number one YouTubers now, right?
He just turned down $1 billion offer, right?
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
But he said in an interview that one of the videos that really took off from him, and it seems really random, was he said he counted from 1 to 100,000. It took him like 17 hours to do it, but he counted from 1 to 100,000. And the reason it gained traction is because people didn't believe anyone would do it. And it took him 17 hours to do it, and he did it in one sitting. And he actually mentioned in an interview that the reason he did it is because he realized that he really wanted to watch the Naruto franchise, right, for anime. He wanted to watch the Naruto franchise. He couldn't justify in his head how long it would take to watch that. So he decided, you know what? I realized that I can count and enjoy the show at the same time. So let me do both. I'm going to be able to create like a viral piece of content, and I can justify actually sitting down and watching the entire series. And so that's what his logic was. And then he ultimately did it. And apparently a lot of bloggers came across the video. They started talking about it. It got mentioned in other podcasts. It got mentioned in, other YouTube channels. And so people started to really understand who Mr. Beast was. And like basically that one video put him on the map. And then from there on, he just cascaded it. He kept on doing more videos like that. Then he started going into like ridiculous stunts, but like he upgraded from there. So I was thinking that for our podcast, we already have the roadmap. We've seen what these top creators are doing. We don't have the budget, or we don't want to spend that much money investing into this to do something ridiculous like those ridiculous stunts or anything like that. But we can do something that's low budget, but that's time consuming, and do something like that to at least put us on the map. So that's what we're thinking there. And the other one, and this is an extremely new idea. Deepam just mentioned it yesterday, actually, which I thought was a fantastic idea. But we want to put out a Your Life Unfiltered book where we profile some interesting guests that we've had on, right? So it could be content creators, it could be business owners, it could be, people from all walks of life. But we want to have like 5 or 6 pages, like basically a chapter dedicated for each guest, and put that out there. Put it on, put that on Amazon, put that on, Barnes and Noble's website, any kind of e-commerce type of book retailer. So those are 2 things that we're hoping in the next couple of years to get out there.
Yeah, I mean, like you guys, like I was mentioning with my advice, you guys have this vision, and you have a blueprint, you have a roadmap to see what other people did to succeed, and don't waver. Just stay down that line. You might make a left turn in life when you should have gone right, but it's okay. You'll find your way back on that path, and you just got to keep pushing forward until when you get to a junction and you have to make another decision. But yeah, wherever it ends up going, you're not going to regret it because you tried, and then you'll learn along the way. You know what I mean? So
yeah,
I'm here for it, and I'm going to support you guys. And thank you for giving me the opportunity. This is awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. Well, thank you everyone for listening. Again, if you guys are not already subscribed to us on Instagram and YouTube, please be sure to give us a follow and subscribe respectively. I hope you guys enjoyed this discussion. If you guys did, please be sure to leave a comment on the YouTube video. With that said, thank you all for joining, and have a great rest of your day.